Future Now Show. Brought to you by the Club of Amsterdam.
Very welcome at the Future Now Show, where we have three experts and trend watchers with us. Karen Geronet, based in Amsterdam, Mark Petz, based in Vienna, and Kate Aquino from New York. Very welcome. And my name is Annegien Blokpoel, and I will be the moderator for this session. Let me start. Karen Geronet, who is an expert in the field of leadership and is working on governance for the future. Can you give us your perspective on what you think is happening at the moment in Europe?
Thanks, Annegien. Yes, of course. Of course, I will start by saying something about if you are Charlie or not Charlie, the recent shootings in Paris, which once more offered an example of the increased polarizations that we see worldwide. The me, us versus the they, them, over there, the other. The differences seem to have religious roots in this case, but if you look at it closely, you also notice that it's essentially about a power struggle. What is that struggle about? It's not about who is in power mainly, but about what worldview to cherish and endorse. Democracy, as it was formulated in the 18th century here in Europe, is very much related, of course, then to freedom of speech. And that's exactly what was attacked in Paris by those who have another worldview, one in which hierarchy, which includes submission and reverence, take a central place. And what I would like to continue talking about is how such religious or mindset or consciousness war is and has become a war on civilizations.
So,
1 minute.
Yes, very good. For such a very complicated subject. So what you're saying it's more a war of those that are open to all opinions and those who think only one opinion is right.
Well, we see that, of course, in the increase of right-wing parties in Germany and other countries. But what I wanted to say is that it's also a war of not only of inclusion, but how you are supposed to see the world. If the world's gonna look the way we have established that through colonization of these countries that are, of course, now coming back to hit back, or if we are going to give in to a consciousness of another order.
Mark, from your point of view as a philosopher of the Philosophy Unbound new movement, what do you think?
I think there's a number of aspects here. At Philosophy Unbound, we're acting as a collective. And I think when I looked at what happened in Paris, I was struck by the phrase that it's become a cliche now. People say clash of civilizations. And there's a viewpoint that they're just different civilizations that are clashing. And I would agree that I don't think it's so simplistic to say they're just different. An argument can be made to saying that there's an Islamic world that's more collective and there's a more individualistic world, which is a European one, and those two happen to clash. I don't think that's what happened here. I think if I think some other people who've talked about changes, spiral dynamics is a possible way of looking at things where we see civilizations move through phases. And you have perhaps, as you say, a more traditional hierarchical way of looking at things, and that's coming to confront what is an increasing group of, they've got different names, sometimes they're called millennials, sometimes they're called cultural creatives, But I think those people are not recognizing the hierarchies anymore. They've moved beyond it. Not that they haven't had that hierarchy in their cultural memory. We had that in the 1960s with counterculture. But it's not just counterculture anymore. It's a plurality of different opinions. And I think that that's what we're seeing, is that some people can accept an opinion that is out-group from them, but that's perfectly fine. Other people want everything to be in-group, with an enemy and a friend. And I can see here there's an element of in-group and out-group thinking. People perpetrated the attack, but the response is very similar to what happened in London, where people wanted to say they're not afraid and that they are with Londoners and show solidarity. But many people like me find this, I don't want to say I'm Charlie, I don't want to say I'm London. I might disagree with the attacks, but it doesn't mean I want to take a hardline dogmatic position, you're my friend or you're my enemy. I want to take a more nuanced viewpoint.
Oh, well, looking at that, Kate, do you think robots would have an emotional state of reaction and choosing one side or another, or having paradigms where they put hierarchy above multi-opinions or vice versa?
Okay, so talking about robotics, artificial intelligence, and transhumanism, I think what we're seeing is that we're becoming more like machines. Machines are becoming more like us. And in the future, we're going to be becoming more like robotics, but we're going to be including, that inclusion is going to be us including these robots in our reality, just like us. We want our robots and our artificial intelligence to be just like us, but I think what's going to happen is, in the future, our robotics and AI may surpass us as far as our intelligences go. Now, what's going to happen also is that if people evolve into post-humans or neo-humans, how are we going to include them, or how are they going to include us, you know, people that are not evolved with this technology? How are they going to be included in the future? That's something that we need to, or yet to discover.
So we're not growing from 7 billion to 9 billion individuals by 2050. We might be growing from 7 billion to 20 billion competitors in 2050.
I think what we're seeing is there's a huge movement now for life extension and anti-aging, just like how Google recently invested in Calico. And I think that we're going to be seeing lots more focus being on, or potentially becoming, immortal. Now, like you're saying, is that we may be having people that live forever. And like you said, I think in the future that we're going to have to be inclusive for all those people being on the planet.
Karen, thinking about this, what does this actually mean for Europe?
It is potentially a threat for what we conceive of as being human. We attach huge value to properties and faculties that we define as particularly human, such as meaning making, imagination, all these forms of consciousness, as I mentioned earlier, that have formed not only philosophy but the world view that we currently live in here in the West. So I see that as an additional threat to our current way of looking at us and our particular identity.
Could it be that if you look at happiness and fear, it's very different if you look at new opportunities that are arising from all the possibilities? If you feel well and you have a bright and optimistic future ahead of you, you might look at them positively, whereas in the phase that we're at the moment, which is still a crisis, a lot of people that don't have a job, the gloom scenario is around. And that part of what we see, the inclusion and exclusion, is also that there's a large number of people that don't have a job and might not think they will get a job easily in the future.
Something I did with a friend of mine a while ago was a project called Orchard of Thoughts. We brought together independent thinkers, and he asked each thinker, what's your deepest value in life? And it happened that my deepest value in life was meaningful inclusion. Other people had all sorts of other values, such as knowing God or caring for everyone, or self-actualization, various things. But what we found is when we analysed all those values from about 90 different people, is that quite often the value that people had was the thing that they had missing in life. So I felt when I look back through my life, there were moments where I wasn't meaningfully included. I didn't have a job, I didn't have a stable place. And so I was looking for that. But also I really valued it because it was missing. So I think if people are starting to feel that they are living in a frightening world, that's because they are in a frightening world. They're missing the security that they want. And that's perhaps at the moment what we are lacking with the crisis, what we are lacking with the way that the society has changed as a part of globalisation. If I come back and think about artificial intelligence, I think artificial intelligence is something very different from what we talked about, which was bringing humans into virtual worlds, virtual humans. And that, to me, starts to become very a comic book. What will happen if you put humans in? You'll have evil humans and good humans. Will you have me never sleeping? Can I create 6 of me? What would happen with someone who's a bit psychopathic? Will you have someone who's a sociopath who wants to control the world? Will you have a Lex Luthor character emerge that uses their technology in order to dominate the markets? So that, to me, is the more frightening thing. I'm not so frightened that it will change Europe. I'm not so frightened it will change America. I think those are gradual things that people accept those existences, those fictions of countries and borders. But in the virtual world, those borders don't really exist. So there, perhaps, things will change. That, for me, is the exciting thing. But I also feel that if you have people who are negative and bad, you will also have Mother Teresa's and Gandhi's. You will have Jesus's and Muhammad's also appear and also start to replicate those things. So for me, the avatars will be like memes, and I'm not too worried.
Okay, so if we think about leadership, and if we talk about living in a sphere of fear, or a sphere of optimistic, or a sphere of reality, if we also think about the games, for example, the prisoner's dilemma and some other games which can help us to think through. Karen, do you think that actually we should use maybe more games to look at positive and negative outcomes before we rally behind and use more of the philosophical ways of thinking about things?
I'm not sure that gaming is the way to exploring the outcomes of philosophy, other than that you can repeat a certain way of thinking about the world that you have already, of course. So I wouldn't know, but I believe Katie might be able to answer that much better, actually.
I think that what we're seeing in general, and what Marcus was saying before, what we're seeing is that basically it's the younger people, younger generations, millennials and younger, that are kind of acting out. And that's why we see a lot of these hackers. A lot of the recent hackings that we've seen have been mostly younger people. So, and I do think that a lot of gaming does help kind of play out different kinds of scenarios. And I think the virtual reality is going to help play out different kinds of scenarios. We're already seeing the U.S. government, the military here, basically they're actually training bomb-sniffing dogs using virtual reality. And so I think that we could also see how different kinds of virtual reality and games can help us see what might happen in the future when it comes to this technology and any other kinds of forms of inclusion. I definitely think it's one way of testing it out, but of course, like anything else, there's nothing like the real experience, and there's always the unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's
leadership. Would you say that it would alter decision making?
Well, when it comes to leadership, it's a little hard to say. I think the word leadership can be kind of broad. It really depends on what the skills and the talents are. Leadership for what exactly?
I would say that leadership is an interesting question, because what I find living here in Austria, which was formerly part of the Deutsche Reich, is that the concept of the Führer is definitely one that people don't want, and they see leadership more as becoming a coordinator, and a coordinator just becomes another role. And therefore the leadership starts to become more collective. You have more of a social democratic way of approaching many things, and leadership is just one facet that people might have. And I think that we can actually see that on the world stage. If you think now, who are the great leaders of the world? You can think in the past and think people were great leaders, but there isn't really anybody that you would think now is a great leader. Angela Merkel, for example, who perhaps would be said to be the leader of Europe at the moment, wouldn't strike you as a strong or dogmatic leader. Her leadership is very subdued.
So this was the Future Now show. Thank you all for listening, and let's go and build a better world. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.